The story of India's rise in the 21st century is not just about economics or population size. It is about how this nation of 1.4 billion people is rewriting the global rules of power. Today, as the world watches the deepening divide between East and West, India finds itself at the very center of the storm. Washington, Brussels, Moscow, and Beijing all understand one thing clearly. Without India, no alliance, no coalition, no grand strategy can work in this new era. And that's why every move India makes, whether it is buying discounted Russian oil, joining Western security dialogues, or pushing for leadership in the global South, immediately becomes headline news around the world. Tonight we are going to dive deep into this most explosive story of our time. How India is walking a tightrope between the West and the East. Why sanctions are no longer working, and why energy, oil, and trade could determine the balance of power for the next 50 years. When Russia launched its war in Ukraine, the West thought sanctions would isolate Moscow. Billions of dollars were frozen, companies withdrew, and Western media predicted an economic collapse. But something unexpected happened. India, alongside China, started buying massive amounts of Russian oil. Cargo ships that once carried energy to Europe began sailing to Indian ports, offloading crude oil at record low prices. India refined that oil and in some cases even exported finished products back to Europe. This wasn't just trade, it was geopolitics. By refusing to bow to Western sanctions, India sent a loud and clear message. We will put our national interests first, and it paid off. Inflation was kept under control. Fuel prices stabilized. And India's economy became the fastest growing major economy in the world. But this decision triggered anger in Washington and Brussels. American officials began warning that India was helping Russia bypass sanctions. European leaders voiced concerns in private meetings. And yet, they knew they couldn't punish India the way they punished others. Why? Because India is too important. For the United States, India is the cornerstone of the Indo-Pacific strategy designed to counter China. For Europe, India is the partner that can help diversify supply chains away from Beijing. And for the rest of the developing world, India has emerged as the voice of the global South, a country that can stand up to Western dominance while still engaging with it. This balancing act is exactly what makes India unique. Exactly what makes every decision Modi's government takes so consequential. Let's think about this carefully. The United States can sanction small nations. It can pressure allies like Germany or Japan. But can it sanction India? Not really. If Washington were to push too hard, it would risk losing India entirely to the Russia-China camp. That would be a strategic disaster, and Modi knows this. He has turned India's strategic importance into bargaining power, ensuring that when India buys oil from Russia, it cannot simply be dismissed as disobedience, as be negotiated as part of a larger geopolitical game. In fact, American officials who once condemned India's oil trade with Russia now quietly admit that India plays a stabilizing role by keeping global energy markets supplied. This is how India converts national interest into global leverage. But oil is just one part of the puzzle. The other battlefield is technology. The United States has been trying to build a new semiconductor alliance, ensuring that chips, the foundation of modern technology, are not dominated by China. India is being courted with promises of investments, factories, and technology transfers. At the same time, Russia and China are pushing India to collaborate in alternative systems that bypass Western-dominated technology supply chains. Once again, India finds itself in the middle. By working with the U.S. on semiconductor research, India gains access to advanced know-how. By trading with Russia, India gains cheap energy and defense cooperation. And by keeping relations with China manageable, India avoids total economic decoupling. This triangular strategy is not an accident, it is a deliberate policy designed to keep India indispensable to all sides. Of course, this balancing act comes with risks. Every time Modi shares a stage with Vladimir Putin, Western media warns of an India-Russia axis. Every time India participates in a QID meeting with the United States, Japan, and Australia, China accuses India of being a pawn of the West, and yet India refuses to be boxed into any one camp. The message is simple. India will cooperate, but it will not be dictated to. It will buy oil where it is cheapest, weapons where they are most reliable, and technology where it is most advanced. This freedom of choice is what defines true sovereignty in today's world order. Now, why does this matter so much for ordinary Indians? Because every container ship carrying Russian oil, every negotiation in Washington about tariffs, every semiconductor investment announcement, these all translate into jobs, prices, and opportunities for India's youth. When India buys cheap oil, it prevents petrol and diesel prices from spiraling. When India negotiates with the U.S. for trade access, it opens doors for Indian IT firms, pharmaceutical companies, and startups. When India invests in BRICS initiatives, it ensures access to new markets in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. This isn't abstract geopolitics. This is about the everyday life of 1.4 billion people who need affordable energy, stable inflation, and new opportunities to climb into the middle class. The big question is, how long can India sustain this balancing act? The West wants India firmly on its side. Russia wants India to remain a loyal partner. China sees India as both a rival and a potential collaborator. And India is saying to all of them, we will choose our own path. This is why the coming decade is being called the Indian Decade. Unlike the Cold War, where nations had to choose between Washington and Moscow, today India is proving that multipolarity can work, that a country can trade with Russia, partner with America, and still speak for the developing world. That is a revolutionary idea in global politics. But let's be clear, this path will not be easy. Pressure will mount from all sides. United States may push for sanctions on Indian companies dealing with Russia. Europe may demand concessions on climate commitments in exchange for trade deals. China may escalate border tensions to test India's resolve. Each of these challenges will force India to make choices. And every choice will have ripple effects across the globe. That is why today, when Modi urges Indians to reduce dependence on foreign products, it is not just about economics, it is about preparing for a world where self-reliance is the ultimate form of security. In the end, the question is not whether India will be a global power. That is already happening. The question is what kind of power India will be. Will it align closely with the United States and become the anchor of the West's Indo-Pacific strategy? Will it deepen ties with Russia and lead a new alternative financial system through BRICS? Or will it chart its own unique path, sometimes with Washington, sometimes with Moscow, but always with New Delhi at the center? The answer, as of now, is that India is doing all three. And that is why India matters more than ever before. So, as viewers, you must understand this is not a distant story about diplomats and leaders. This is about your fuel prices, your job opportunities, your future. When you see Modi on stage with Putin or shaking hands with Biden, remember, those images are not just politics. They're signals of where the global order is heading. And right now, all signs point to one truth. India is no longer just a participant in the global game. India is becoming the game changer.